Welcome to the Prime podcast, where we explore how leading companies bring ideas to market at warp speed. I'm Lydia Hawthorn, a managing consultant here at Cprime, and I'm bringing you insights from pioneers in tech, product, and new ways of working. We'll uncover the tools and mindsets allowing top organizations to quickly ideate, design, and deliver. Expect tactics on empowering nimble teams, accelerating innovation, and excelling in adaptability. If you want fresh perspectives on executing efficiently, this is the place. So welcome everybody to the second episode of the Prime Pod, brought to you by Cprime. We are a specialist agile transformation tech and tooling consultancy, and we operate globally across every vertical. I'm joined today by Carrie Knott, who is the previous head of customer transformation at British Airways and is now very luckily part of our Cprime family as a consultant. So welcome, Carrie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And so I'd really just love to start by sort of talking about the theme of today. We're going to be talking about putting people at the heart of your change. And really, it would be great just to hear from you about your background, how you found yourself here today as a bit of an introduction.
Sure. Well, I'm currently working as an associate for Cprime and one of their large automotive clients. But prior to that, actually, I've had a very long career at British Airways. And that was really where my passion for change and transformation really was ignited. I'd had a frontline role, but after a number of years, I went into change and transformation, leading big waterfall strategic programs across a whole wide range of different departments. So quite a good grounding in different transformation in different parts of the business. But whilst you can see that the risks are different and the stakeholders are different and the scope of the change is different, what I realised very quickly is, of course, it's people that experience change, it's people that are impacted by change. And so that's where my passion really grew for sort of a people-focused approach to delivering change and having that in my mind, I suppose. So I've taken that with me in all the roles that I've gone on to do, but I'm really interested really in the cultural and behavioural aspects of change.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole people versus processes. And sure. I think it's such an important fact to pick up on because often Agile is being used in those technical environments. We can sometimes get caught up, right, in the jargon and the technicalities when really it's the people that are the ones stewarding the transformation. Brilliant. So reflecting on your career, can you talk about a time where your team, took that people-centric approach to change?
Yeah, so I'd probably talk about a large strategic change program that I led at British Airways. It was a program that was probably at the forefront of the business plan at that time. It had a huge amount of attention from investors, from internal and external stakeholders, and it was going to impact all 38,000 colleagues in a way that was perceived to be quite negative. Mm-hmm. So with that, it carried quite a significant people risk. And so right from the outset, I was really keen that we really understood the different degrees of impact, who would be impacted and how, the reasons that people would resist that change and why, and how we could tackle that. And so what was great was that all of the programme team, the exec sponsors of the programme and everybody working on it really agreed that we had to put people at the heart of that change in order to ensure that not only did we de-risk the delivery of the programme, but that on the other side of it, we were left with an engaged workforce that had really understood why the change had occurred and really were able to sort of work effectively with us in the future, because often that's when trust breaks down. So we took a very holistic approach to the change. We thought an awful lot about ensuring that people understood why the change was occurring, but it's not just about the message, it's about thinking about the messenger as well. So in order to build that trust, we utilised not just internal people, but some external advisors to promote that sort of objective, worldly perspective on everything that was happening. We upskilled some of our senior leaders to become super communicators. We used a multi-channel approach with media in different mediums so that we could ensure that that was consumed by people in a way that they really appreciated, whether that was video or print or our internal social media, etc. So we tried our best, I suppose, to give people enough information at the right time to help them understand the change. And as a result, the programme was delivered successfully, and some of those risks that had been identified at the outset didn't materialise. So that was really positive.
Yeah, and I think taking that creative approach is so important when you're being people-centric, right? Because, there's a lot of, I suppose, assumptions that transformation or change, especially in big businesses, big corporate businesses, needs to feel corporate. And in actual fact, people really appreciate when you're on that human level connecting to something that they find interesting and engaging. And of course, there's a balance to be struck right between being all of those things and using novelty or gimmicks, but certainly bringing that creativity into how you communicate, using different types of platforms and medias to do that is just such a brilliant way to bring energy, right, to the transformation.
I agree. And I think sometimes there's a danger that people think that the people side of delivering change is purely about communication, and instead you need to take a really broad approach to understanding the different dimensions of what your change management plan needs to be, because in some cases it needs something much deeper. In some cases it requires a significant amount of investment in learning and development, in engagement of different forms, and it can't just be a bolt-on of a few posters and an email at the end. It rarely really delivers sustainable change in that way.
Yeah, and that sustainable change piece is so important. I always talk about like real impactful change.
Correct. And I think for most people, their experience of change is hard, it's unknown, and it includes stepping into something that's new, and that creates different levels of anxiety for a number of people. So it's quite natural then that it's easier to fall back into old ways of working and to not sort of try that new thing that's been put in front of you, whether it's a new piece of technology or a new way of working. And so it's up to us as change practitioners to really smooth that path and help people on that journey. And everyone experiences that differently, so you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you maybe explain the catalyst for the last major transformation that your teams underwent?
Yeah, so before I left BA, I had the opportunity to lead a large team, so as a head of function, so our cabin crew management team. I was there to cover for somebody's primary parent leave, so it was a fantastic opportunity to really see the business from the business side rather than the change delivery side. It's coincided with the recovery really from COVID, so a very exciting time in the airline after it had more or less been shut down during the pandemic, and a hard time for everybody, but really joyful to see the world beginning to open up, so very exciting. But at the same time, it was happening at a pace that was completely unprecedented. So everything was gearing back up at a rate that was very difficult for the internal teams to manage, and also the external providers who supported us. So where we needed to scale up the number of flights, we had colleagues returning from furlough, we had colleagues who we were welcoming back to the business who'd left the business, and we were recruiting unprecedented numbers of new colleagues into the business, and so training, recruitment, all of those things, and we were reliant on a lot of external providers to support us with that, and it was really hard to keep up. But my team also were a large number of people supporting those teams on the ground, so the management and support. And that demographic of colleagues who they were there to support and manage were suddenly very different, because the vast majority of them were either newly returning or new to the business and had completely different needs. And that community was also dealing with really different customer expectations, customers experiencing a lot of stress as they returned to travel, documentation checks and vaccinations and all those kind of things. So the pressures on the team were very different. And so we had to look at our own internal resources and think, how are we going to support people in this new way, a completely different set of needs, different types of colleagues and different pressures that they're facing in their own jobs. And so we looked at how we could prioritise, and that was where my background in transformation, I think, really helped me, because we started to look at where do we deliver the most value? So who needs us most and in what way, and how can we most efficiently provide that service to our teams as our internal customers, really.
Yeah.
So we set up a dedicated team just to focus on our brand new entrants, to support them in being their best and really being successful in that first year in the company. And really looking at ways that we could provide services to people in a much more streamlined and efficient way. And I suppose it was the combination of seeing a need and also having that ability to pivot from the way you'd previously worked and adopt a new way of working that delivered some benefit then to the business quite rapidly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we see it time and time again that getting that triaging space right of bringing new items in, breaking it down, what does this mean? How urgent is this? How much value is it actually going to deliver? Is one of the quickest ways to recoup time, money, effort, people's time, in terms of, when you've got a massive backlog of items that
Correct.
need some sort of structure to them, right?
Yeah.
You have to make a priority call somehow.
Yeah, and thinking about how you measure the impact that you're having as well. So you could think you're doing the right thing, but actually you're putting a lot of time and energy into something that, as it turns out, wasn't as valuable as you thought, or the interventions that you put in place weren't impactful. And so again, you need to course correct and figure out how to do something better. So again, I think that transformation change mindset really helped me in that time and helped support the team in making the changes they needed to.
Sure. And what advice would you give to somebody who feels that they haven't quite got that people-centric approach to their transformation?
Well, I think if they're asking themselves that question, I think that's a really good sign, because I think just by asking that question and recognising that there's a need is the first step that some people fail to consider in their change. It's really hard delivering change. You're often facing really complex scope decisions. You're working with suppliers and procurement and technology, and it's easy to get lost in the execution and the delivery without thinking about people. So just stopping and reflecting, are people on board with this? Do they really know what's happening? Asking those questions, I think, helps lead you into the right actions that you need to put in place. And for most people, it's just understanding why you're doing this. And we can work in a project team or within agile teams where we think our strategy is really clear. But you need to, again, test that out and understand, do the people who are working with us or impacted by the change really understand that? Do they know why we're doing this? And have we really tested that theory that we think we've got this? Generally, you can never over-communicate the why and ensure that that's really understood. Firstly, I read a lot. Secondly, I talk to my colleagues and peers and quite open about the things that I found challenging. We really help each other and create that sort of supportive network. But also find just things that are online. There's a huge amount of resources on the SAFE website, for example. You don't need to have adopted SAFE in order to go in and read those. And there's really good guidance in lots of different practices, such as design thinking or different things, prioritization, that you may find applicable to your environment, even if you haven't really adopted that as a methodology. So there's a wide range of resources out there, but I think the change networks that exist amongst the peer group are really where I really rely on those kind of opportunities to have frank conversations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I find myself at lots of meetups, at events, and I was at one last night, Product Tank Manchester, which is, Product Tank is global, right? Lots of meetups happening, but Product Tank Manchester, speaking to other product owners, product managers, heads of product about, their challenges with prioritization, their challenges with story mapping and breaking work down and how to forecast correctly. And often just knowing you're in a room full of people who are also feeling the same pinch points that you have in the past makes you feel less alone in it, right? Because there's often a lot of pressure on people's shoulders who are carrying transformations out, especially at scale, right? In large scale businesses involving hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. So the next section we're going to focus on are the Cprime Big Four questions. We ask every single guest these, and it's really to try and give those people who are watching at home a bit of an insight into who you are as a person and the kind of career roller coaster that you may have gone on. So the first one is, what it has been your biggest fail? We'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So I guess it's an interesting word, right, when we talk about failure. And I think as agilists and change practitioners, we love a good fail to kind of take the learning away. But when it happens to you, it doesn't always feel like that. And I think sometimes it takes time to kind of dust yourself off and pick yourself up. But in time, often you look back and see those as the biggest learning opportunities that you've had, and also the opportunities to perhaps find a creative solution that you wouldn't have done if the path to that had been really smooth. And so often I think failure is about disappointment when things don't work out and how you become resilient to that too. Probably one of the best examples was when I was leading the head of our Centre of Excellence in Business Transformation, and that comprised our corporate portfolio office, all of our waterfall programs, our change management practice, our RPA team, and sort of the delivery professional development side. But we were embarking on our first Agile transformation. And I knew nothing about Agile then, and none of us really did, except one person in the team who was an absolute star, who kind of had worked in Agile teams, had brought lots of experience, and had already gained some certifications with Scaled Agile, and was like, this is what we need to do here. This is going to be perfect to help this business really radically change. And I was completely bought into it. So we embarked on some training, and we started sort of trying to adopt some Agile practice within some of the programs of work in a largely waterfall environment. Although other parts of the business were much more mature, we were kind of in our side of transformation not working in that way at that time. And it kind of worked a little bit. We had pockets of success, but it didn't gain that momentum that we thought. We had big dreams about how we were going to really transform the business, and it was really disappointing because we'd put so much into it, and we had so much belief. But what we realised actually by working with partners from Cprime was that we weren't talking to the right people. So we were kind of creating some really strong fires on the ground. We had teams who were really excited and we were seeing some benefit, but we hadn't taken our leadership on the journey to really understand what those potential benefits might be. And so it was with the support of some of the Cprime colleagues that we started preparing to run some exec workshops with our management committee. And that was where we really thought, okay, this is going to be the turning point for our transformation. And then sadly, we went into COVID and those things didn't happen. And the teams have gone on to do great things with a huge amount of support from the business. So all was not lost. But at that time, I think our dreams of what we were going to create didn't quite come to fruition, and but what I learned from that was really kind of going back to what we were saying about change practitioners, that you can't expect to know all of this, and it takes more than a couple of people or a small group of people with energy and enthusiasm and some knowledge to be able to take on a huge transformation, completely changing the way you work and how you value the work that's done, and how you approach the delivery of that. So to do that alone, I realise now is pretty tall order, and very few organisations can do that. So I would definitely always advocate bringing in that expertise and guidance to help shape those early stages, and to really make sure you're talking to people at each level of the organisation and finding that slice through that can really help you create that brilliant example that gets everybody else on board.
Yeah, and it's such an important point I think you make around this word fail and what it means in the English language versus what we're really talking about when we ask people, what is your biggest fail? What we're really asking is, what's been your biggest lesson? What scenario taught you the most? And your example there reminds me of the quote, to not start is to fail. And actually that's exactly what you did. You did the best that you could with the knowledge that you had and the circumstances that you had to get things moving. And quite often there can be in transformation a couple of false starts before the thing that really makes the change happen. But without those false starts, no progress would ever be made. So I do think, agile transformations can sometimes themselves miss out on that agile value of relentless improvement. And we expect to get it right the first time, when in actual fact, it should be iterative. You should try some things here, learn from them, And then,
And I think the danger, if you don't embrace those false starts and those learning points, is that you give up just at the point when you are about to make a huge, a kind of leap forward, because it isn't always, this sort of linear incremental path with things like that. Sometimes, especially when it's about getting senior support or kind of getting a whole organisation behind, a new approach. Is that you suddenly something clicks and you just don't know, if you give up, you just don't know how close you were to making that happen. So I think all transformation practitioners are really resilient individuals, because you're facing into that a lot of the time, and you're often trying to smooth that path for other individuals as well, and teach them what you've learned along the way.
Yeah. Just millions of inspirational quotes coming out of me today, because then I'm like, exactly, you miss 100% of the chances that you don't take. But on that point then, what has been your biggest win?
I think often the biggest wins are the things that you reflect back on in those times when you're challenged. So maybe there's been a fail or a disappointment or a bit of a knockback. And so you go back to those times when you felt strong, or you felt kind of, yes, that, we did that. And so probably I'd go back to one of the first things that gave me the confidence to really embark on this career journey, because I was working in a frontline role at British Airways. I took a secondment to work on the T5 programme, which many of your listeners will remember wasn't a hugely successful programme in some aspects. I'd like to say our part of the programme went brilliantly. But we were responsible for helping our cabin crew move to their new environment. It was a big change in the way they reported for duty, about the way they kind of checked in for flights, and how they arrived back post their flights. And so I was responsible for all of the communications and engagement around that. And I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that I was quite good at writing, and I understood my audience, and that was my starting point. And I was going in to support another colleague who was a comms professional to do that piece of work for a period of time. And then very sadly, she had to take an extended period of time off work. And they said, okay, well, if you could just do that, that would be great. And I was so daunted, and I felt so out of my depth, and I'd never done anything like that before, and so in that moment I felt, I don't know if I've got it in me to do this. But I reflected on the things that I was good at, and I knew I was pretty organised, where I'd never written a plan before, and I knew that I kind of knew what I was talking about, so I just got on with it, and it went really well, and it gave me a massive confidence boost to say, okay, well, when you draw on those skills that you have got, stop focusing on the things that you don't know how to do, and ask for help, learn along the way. Don't be deterred when something goes wrong, and in the end, you can end up with a strong result. And actually, it was a really good outcome. I learnt a lot from the people in the project team around me. Had some wonderful feedback from people that I really admired within the business, who were kind of working in the larger programme. And in recognition for the work that I did, I was invited to meet the Queen as
Amazing.
part of the official opening. So that to me was probably what I really needed, to be given the confidence that you can step out and to do something completely new, and maybe you can do this. And I think they're good little things to have in your pocket for when you start thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I'm up to this. But you've faced into those challenges in the past, and they're often those biggest periods of growth in your career. And so taking a big deep breath and kind of jumping in with 2 feet, being prepared to ask for help, I think then that's always quite exciting time.
Absolutely. And I think, often people who find themselves as transformation agents inside businesses, as head of transformation, whether you're looking after agile delivery, we tend to be those people who, in a real crisis, people are glad that we're around, because we somehow find our way through. And it's not that we're not daunted at times, or that it doesn't occur to us, exactly like you said, like, am I really up to this? But that you see the best option is through, not to turn around and go the other way. And, from the hottest flames come the strongest steel. So quite often it's when we do our best work as well, when there's a lot on the line. And I think that's what our businesses appreciate, right? Is that we were able to deliver in times where it seemed almost impossible.
Yeah, and just circling back to thinking about people impacts is, if you are the kind of person that can thrive in uncertainty and volatility and change, which I think many of us are that are working in this space, you are also, it is incumbent upon you to support those people around you who find that they're just inertia sets in that period, or deep anxiety and the kind of paralysis of not knowing what to do next. And actually you need people that in those times can go, it's going to be okay, we're just going to figure out what's the best next thing to do, even if we don't know what the big thing is. We're just going to do this because this feels right based on the information that we have, and we're just going to go for it. So I think you really do need people like that on your team to pick you up, and we all have days when we need somebody else, that helps do that for us too. But I think it is natural that for most people their experience of change is tough, and it's good to have someone around who's helping you navigate it.
Absolutely. And so at Cprime, our mission is to turn ideas into actions faster. Mm-hmm. So thinking about people that you've worked with in the past, who is an example of someone who was capable of making ideas turn in... Let me start again because that's the wrong way around. So at Cprime, our mission is to turn ideas into action faster. So thinking about people that you've worked with in the past, who is somebody who is the epitome of that, and what was it about them that made them so good at turning ideas into actions faster?
I'd have to call out Tim Jackson. So you may know Tim. He's another
I do know
Cprimer.
Tim, yeah.
But Tim and I worked together at BA. He's an amazing individual and friend now, who I draw on his kind of support and his mentoring to think about lots of things in life, because Tim has this natural ability to apply energy and enthusiasm to everything he does. And I don't know where he gets it all from. He's a busy working dad, but he's always seemed to find that energy to focus on what's important, to ask the right questions and have fun along the way, but also to tease out really what are you really trying to do and what do you really want and what's holding you back. And I go to him for book recommendations, for support when I don't know what to do, but also we talk through the things that are important to us in the other aspects of our lives, because I think Tim is always somebody who will kind of get to the heart of what you're trying to do, and is a great coach because you still feel like you made the decision and you did the work. So yeah, shout out to Tim.
Yeah, we love Tim. Another person in the Cprime family, luckily. And the last question to sort of round off our session today, and it's been a great conversation, is what is an idea that you would like to see turned into action faster?
Well, I've got a good example of something I've just turned into action yesterday.
Amazing.
But that I've been putting off for a long time. Tim's involved in this decision too, I have to say. But as someone who's really committed to my own development, and we talked about the sources of where you get that support, but I've been thinking for a while I'd really like to kind of broaden my coaching practice to learn more about different coaching models with enterprise leaders. It's something that I see a real need for. We talked a bit before about senior leaders kind of being quite a lonely space. And so I've been thinking for some time about embarking on a sort of higher level qualification in that area, and it's a commitment of time, it's a financial commitment, but it's something that I think is really worthwhile. But I've been toying with this idea for a long time, and again I talked to Tim about it, and based on some discussions we've had, I found myself signing up, and I'm embarking on that learning journey later this year. So I think it's really great to give that time and commitment to something that matters to you, and improve your practice, and to know we're not the finished article, that there's always more to learn, and hopefully that others that you're working alongside can benefit from that learning as well.
Absolutely. Lead by example, I say. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your time today, Carrie. It's been awesome getting to chat with you. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in to watch or to listen. There will be another Cprime Prime Pod episode coming. Guest TBC, but I just want to say thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of our podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, we'd love for you to help more people discover the show by leaving a review and rating. Your feedback really makes a difference. Also, don't be shy about spreading the word on social media. Feel free to share a screenshot of this episode and tag @Cprime Inc. on LinkedIn so others can get in on the action. For more information, head over to cprime.com to access a treasure trove of resources to enhance your knowledge. Stay tuned for more insightful episodes as we dive deeper into the ever-changing world of product, technology, and ways of working with the experts at Cprime and beyond. Stay curious out there, and catch you on the next episode.